Facebook is dead, and thank goodness Facebook is dead. It's been long overdue that that platform dies. For the past several days, there's been discussion of how Facebook, working with Cambridge Analytics, sold data to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. A lot of people are reacting with surprise and indignation. I'm not surprised at all. People who've been paying attention, people who've cared about privacy, even in a tangential way, have known for years that Facebook was taking their personal data and selling it. I certainly did, and hence was one of the reasons I didn't put a lot of personal information on Facebook. And I also knew that Facebook was tracking. Why? I don't have any special personal insights or arcane knowledge. It was just obvious. You could tell that they were doing this. They even admitted it in their own emails. Back in 2010, Business Insider published an article, and it discussed an email that Mark Zuckerberg had sent some years ago, back when he was 19, to a college friend. The email reads as follows, and this is Mark Zuckerberg speaking. Yeah, so if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, SNS. His friend writes back, What? How do you manage that? And Zuck replies, People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me, dumb fucks. This was back on May 13th, 2010, this article came out. This is 2018. People have known about this for 8 years, and if you didn't know about it, the information was available. Why, all of a sudden, with Donald Trump's campaign, do we care? If anybody doesn't think that President Obama's campaign was not using Facebook data and paying for it the same way that Donald Trump's campaign did, you might want to re examine some of the news stories that have been coming out, because Obama's former campaign managers have admitted exactly what the Trump campaign did. But this isn't about politics. This isn't about left or right, Democrat, Republican, nationalist, or socialist. None of that matters, because the point here is greater. The point is that for years, people knew about Facebook selling their data, and if they didn't know about it, there was no reason for them not to know, because the information was always available to them. And also, it doesn't really matter that people finally care now. So what if people care because they hate Donald Trump? Does it really matter? The point is, what Facebook was doing was eventually going to reach mass consciousness. It doesn't matter how it reached that point, whether it was reached for a good reason or a bad reason. What matters is you have a sizable number of people who are angry with Facebook, who are dumping it as a platform, and who are moving to alternative forms of social media to communicate with people. The same privacy concerns will still exist. Scandals like this will happen in the future, and there's probably a new one brewing as we speak right now. What it is, I don't know, but it will probably be some form along the Facebook scandal. Lying about the use of private data, selling it to companies for private gain, and then denying that anything ever happened. Like with many things in human life, there are cyclical patterns. Facebook has known for years, at least the past 5 years, that they were becoming irrelevant. They weren't getting the Generation Z to sign up. The younger people just weren't interested. And really, anybody who's over the age of 25 are its only users. 25 and under, that demographic barely exists for them. So, what happens to Facebook? It's not going to disappear overnight, but eventually it's going the way of MySpace. MySpace is still around, but it's irrelevant. No one cares about it. It's more or less an obituary to people's lives, people's pasts, some things they like and don't like, and maybe would care to forget. This is a very good thing because we're seeing with the slow death of Facebook, again, remember, it is the largest platform in the Western world used by people for social media. So something with 2.2 billion users just doesn't die overnight. It'll take time. But what we are seeing right now is another paradigm shift in social media. That paradigm shift is the same reason why you have seen, starting this year, the so-called YouTube crackdown, where people with YouTube channels that have existed for many years are being flagged, being taken down, and disappearing. Why is that? The reason is simple. The next major media for the millennials and for Generation Z is a return to radio and television via the internet. You see, we're in the midst of a revolution right now, similar to what happened last century. For decades, the printing presses, the major publishing houses were all controlled centrally. They were controlled by a group of very wealthy persons in banking, in industry, and finance who had one set goal: to make sure that books they wanted published were published, and to make sure that books that they didn't want published were not published, or to obstruct the process so much that people would just give up. Certainly, there were many books published that were critical of their establishment, but it took a lot more effort to do it. The internet has already streamlined this process, for by connecting individuals with publishing sources, blogs, independent printers, whether they are domestic or around the world, people can publish their own writings at a fraction of the cost. This has forced an increase in the quality of writing that you will see. Yeah, it's easy right now to publish a cheap, junky book. You know what I'm talking about. The kind of books that are 200 pages long, triple spaced, size 65 font, and say the same things we've heard 55, 60 billion times. These books are still being published, and they are still very popular. But there's something bigger that I speak of here that we see. What I'm speaking of is that these same books that still you can find at any bookstore, go into your local Barnes and Noble, you'll see it. These books are also dated. They're a product of another time. And while they will always exist in some form, their presence is going to decrease. People want information. If they're going to read something, they want quality information. They want something that will be detailed, something that will give them cause to think, something that will feed their mind today, tomorrow, and in the future. That is the paradigm shift we see taking place just in writing. In social media, it's the same paradigm with Facebook. Facebook represented the 200-page triple space size 65 font book for sharing personal information. That paradigm will always exist, but it's passing away, and it's giving way to a new market segment: radio, television, but this time through the internet. You turn on your local radio station, it's all controlled by one of a few major media companies, and of course they feed the same propaganda. The internet is not something that people can control as easily. That's why YouTube is having the crackdown. The powers that be want to see YouTube centralized. They want to see it controlled. They want to make it harder for people to communicate their ideas. And it's not just YouTube. It's Vimeo as well. It was also the reason why VidMe, which was an up and coming website for video sharing, and a very popular one too, shut itself down. The majority of their audience was gamers. And, of course, it's nice for people to share their so called hobbies. But Vimeo was becoming much more political. People were sharing their views on it, and it was getting popular. That company chose to close its doors rather than allow for the natural and healthy growth that was taking place to occur. Expect for 2018. Expect going forward an increase in media, an increase in radio and television through the internet. Expect a decrease in the use of Facebook type platforms. Expect a decrease in the 200-page, 65-point font, triple spaced books. Those are like the boomers and the silent generation. They're passing away. When people talk about revolutions, we think it happens in a big, flashy, easy to see way. Most revolutions don't. And when you see those flashes, those are the ends, products of smaller events that have accumulated to a point that their effects can no longer be hidden, and they manifest quickly. Most revolutions happen in silence. And by the time the effects of the revolution are realized, it's as though people went to sleep one day and everything was the same, and the next day they wake up and it's a different world. It's sort of like death. One moment you're alive, next moment you're dead, and you're either in heaven or hell or purgatory. That's the way life works. Change doesn't happen gradually, like we're told so often. It's not a linear line. Change is exponential. If you've ever seen a mathematical graph of an exponential function that's been charted, you'll notice that the line starts out almost parallel with the x-axis. Increases, it increases, it increases, and then it hits this inflection point. And at that inflection point, you see a massive growth, and the line just spikes upward. It goes to the sky, and then it continues and continues. That is what we're looking at with media. It's happening again. It's normal. It's natural. It's life and history repeating itself. So for the time being, this is Andrew signing off. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something from it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.